Hello and welcome back to A Fall from Grace. So, last we saw, I want to say Cedric and Vincent had finally reached the bandit camp, which are friends with Vincent. And actually, it wasn't so much that they're friends, it used to be his old band of thieves, which were also his friends. Um, and the recently bandited decided to undertake their quote unquote trials in order to become a bandit himself. Um, and he passed. He he was supposed to drink and then do like an obstacle course, which he was able to do. I don't remember the second one, but I think the third one was where he was supposed to do like a play or reading from the hyena's script. And these are all things that were supposed to help him sort of put on the performance that you need to put on in order to rob people. And the last one was where he has to get his own mask, and he was able to do that. But in doing so, he ended up running into the lion. I think his name is Lysander, um, who basically saw that he was there. He was trying to get him, come back with me. You belong with me. But he's like, no, and so unfortunately, the lion knows that he's there around that area, and yeah, who knows what's gonna happen with that. But for the most part, he is a bandit now. He's officially recognized by these people, and he has his own mask now. So yeah, we're about to see what's gonna happen with that, I guess. I don't know. It's been a while, so I won't fault you guys for going like, what is this story about again? So yeah, it's a guy that decides to run away from home when he comes back, or when he meets his not ex-friend, his friend from childhood who disappeared after their parents sort of got rid of them. Um, but yeah. Anyways, so yeah, without further ado, let us continue A Fall from Grace. Ripe strawberries. Fine silverware for the ladies. Knives to grind. The hustle and bustle of the market life filled, chipping Bambrough's elegant square as vendors and villagers alike went about their business. A traveler passing by need but spare a glance at the hurried frenzy to gather this was one of the largest and most frequented market towns in the West Country. Indeed, folks from all walks of life could be spotted adding a vibrant color palette to the picturesque location. Old servant maids, coarse young boys, sprightly female vendors, finely dressed gentlemen from neighboring villages doing their best to stand out from Bramboro's lower class inhabitants, even the old preacher foretelling the end of days from a shady corner, all surrounded Cedric as he made his way around the square. Hollis and Silwen were at his side, accompanying him on his particular outing. This was now the fifth morning since the coyote had first met the bandits, and except a couple of odd jobs he'd agreed to help out with around the camp, this was the first proper task as a member of the masquerade. The others had thought that they'd start off with pickpocketing, a slight more subtle and possibly low effort activity, a marketplace being the perfect bustling setting for them to blend in amongst the crowd and get their dirty work done. However, Hollis had still advised them to practice the utmost caution when in town. It may be less risky than robbing the king's guards, but they'll hang a cut purse just as well as they'd hang a highwayman. Those words still rang out in the back of Cedric's mind, even as he had made some casual conversation with the two. Those apples look delicious. Only 2 shillings a score, my darling. You hungry already, Hollis? It's nearly midday. I suggest that we grab a pie on our way to out of town. I'm not sure. Should be watching my weight, you know. The tiger grumbled. Fine. I need to get a couple of things to take back to the camp anyway. Then he came to a halt, seemingly out of nowhere. He suddenly leaned towards Cedric, lowering his tone as he whispered in the coyote's ear. "Cedric, lad, you see the gentleman in the blue coat?" Cedric swallowed nervously, nodding as he eyed the plump, well-dressed bull Hollis was referring to. "He'll do nicely for your first." "Oh no. Do you feel ready?" "Definitely not." "Yes." "Damn it. Remember what we told you and good luck." Silence, stealth, agility. "Alright, let's do this." The coyote gathered his courage and quietly walked up to the bull, who was busy eyeing some elegant silverware. Both large hands were behind his back, arms crossed as he examined the stall's contents. A small and tastefully blue purse matching the rest of his outfit hung on his left hip. The vendor was busy dealing with another customer. This was obviously Cedric's moment to act. He took out a tiny pocket knife, holding the purse with his left hand as he cut the gold lace string which had been anchoring it to the coat. Those 3 seconds seemed to have lasted eons as Cedric kept monitoring the bull's every movement, terrified that he might notice something was wrong until finally he felt the purse come loose in his hands. He'd done it, and his victim was none the wiser. He rapidly inspected his surroundings. None of the folks in his vicinity seemed to give him the slightest of notice. Was this really as simple as a tiger had made it sound? Suddenly the bull's hands moved as he reached for an item on the stall in front of him, the vendor noticing his movement and turning towards him. "Excuse me, are these new?" "Aye, sir. Haven't even been touched yet." Luckily, his victim was large enough to block Cedric from the vendor's view. Heaving a sigh of relief, the coyote turned around, ready to rapidly make his way back to Hollis and Selwyn. Suddenly, he collided with an old badger he hadn't noticed approaching to his right, the two falling to the ground from the impact. "Oi, watch where you're going, you jackanapes!" "I'm very sorry, sir. Really, I am." Cedric stuttered as he attempted a panicked apology, noticing the purse he had taken had fallen out of his pocket. Oh God, where was it? Had it fallen to the ground? What if the bull saw it? I'm done for. "And take your money while you're at it. I'm sure as hell don't want it." The badger chucked the purse at him. Cedric pocketed it as fast as he could as he picked himself up, sprinting back to where the others had been waiting. This felt like it could have all gone much, much better to him. The feeling of discovering he wasn't cut out for banditry after all had begun to grow in the back of his mind since completing his trials to join the masquerade. He tried to tell himself that it was just a question of self-doubt, but after this rusty attempt at something as supposedly simple as pickpocketing, it was hard to keep repressing these negative thoughts. Catching up with them, he noticed both felines were sporting an amused smile. Whether it was a sign of admiration or contempt, he couldn't tell yet. "Well done, lad." The coyote was still breathing heavily and didn't even manage to reply, simply following the others as they headed to a quiet, shady alley. "You pulled that off smoothly. He didn't even notice you." "Just remember, your job's not over when you pocket the money, as you learned just now. There's always something going on around you." Cedric nodded, slightly embarrassed at being lectured by the tiger. Selwyn chuckled nearby, likely recalling the first time that he'd gone pickpocketing with the others. "Don't worry, Cedric. I've had way worse experiences than that." "Victor will be proud of you." "I hope so." The coyote paused before finishing his sentence, as he noticed the cheeky grin the usually timid house cat was sporting. "What's Victor got to do with this? Why should I need his approval?" "I'm sorry, I didn't mean... I... Hollis burst into laughter at Selwyn's sudden outburst of sheer panic. "Cedric, we're not blind, nor indeed are we deaf. We've all seen the way that you two look and talk to each other by now. Clear as daylight." "Oh, I see." Cedric lowered his head as he felt his cheeks grow warm. He wasn't able to restrain himself from blushing all over. Was it really so obvious? Obvious enough for every single one of the bandits to notice? "We have grown extremely close." He glanced around at their surroundings nervously, making sure none of the passersby were close enough to hear their topic of conversation. Now wasn't the time to go looking for trouble. He then resumed talking, albeit in a lower tone than earlier. I suppose we've begun dating, if you can call it that, though it's unofficial for the time being. The two felines smiled as Cedric let out a nervous laugh. I'm sorry. This is all so new to me. I don't want to jinx it, but it's in my honest opinion that you two are made for each other. Wouldn't you say so, Hollies? They certainly have a strong connection. And perhaps by some miracle your elegant ways could end up rubbing off on Victor. The tiger mumbled. I'm sure that's not the only thing that he liked to rub off on Victor. Oh my goodness, stop bullying me. The three laughed as they crossed the sunlit square. Come now, Cedric. We all agree Victor is a dashing young fellow. You're very lucky. They spent another half-hour walking around the town, as Cedric eyed some charming decorative trinkets in one of the shops, namely a fox-shaped ring displayed in the bay window. He rolled his eyes at his own wishful thinking. You absolute hopeless romantic. Are we really contemplating marriage already? Of course not. Well, perhaps in a future lifetime. He stopped by the fountain to fill his empty flask, preparing himself for the journey back. After lingering at one of the market stalls while Hollies purchased some food for the group's supplies, the three soon left the town behind them as the sky began to grow overcast. Though the purse Cedric had stolen was modest in size, the amount of gold in it contained more than made up for it. Once the three had counted each coin, they estimated at least 10 meals worth in money for the whole group. The journey back was smooth but tiring, as they trudged across what the coyote could have sworn were at least a dozen muddy green fields, too many, aiming to reach the camp before sunset. As soon as they had reached their lodgings, Victor almost jumped up from the log that he'd been sitting on and ran to greet the three bandits. How did everything go, boys? His eyes met Cedric as he continued in a softer tone, resting a hand at the coyote's shoulder. Good evening, my newly trained rogue. I hope you had a lovely time. Cedric smiled faintly. I did. Thank you, V. With Holly's and Selwyn's help, I knew that I was in good hands. He didn't sound particularly convinced about this statement, however, Victor picking up on it immediately. Is anything wrong? No, I... The coyote paused, considering whether his self-doubt was a subject that he should ever bring up, especially in front of the two bandits who had been tasked with training him for the day. He didn't want them to get the impression that he thought their training was useless, not after everything that they've done. But it surely would be better to bring this up now than let it fester until a later date. Taking comfort in the fact that he'd managed to grow closer not just to Victor, but the other bandits too, Cedric sighed and finally spoke up. Well, yes. I've been feeling a bit frustrated. About what? I'm not improving as fast as I'd like. These skills are vital to my survival, at least for the time being. And if I keep botching them, I might as well dig my own grave here and now. But I thought things went well today. It's not about today. It's just a general feeling that I can't shake off. You were right to be angry at me after our first robbery. If this isn't something that I can adapt to quickly, I might as well go home. Cedric, look me in the eyes. The coyote lifted his head as he met Victor's gaze. I was wrong to be angry with you at that time. I expected too much. Don't set yourself the same warped expectations. You simply need practice. That's all that there is to it. That's the only way to learn. And you got some practice today, did you not? Aye, I did. A wave of self-doubt suddenly overcame Cedric, forcing him to avert his gaze from the fox. He replied softly, observing the mossy ground in front of him. And now you know how to go about pickpocketing, right? Aye, I do. That's an improvement, and I'm sure Hollis and Selwyn will agree. Both felines nod, and Hollis wrapped an arm around Cedric to comfort him. We've all been there, lad. No one's born a thief. Plus, you're quite the natural pickpocketer. Things could have gone smoother, I suppose, but when do they, especially during one's first attempt? Hollis had already begun to head to his carriage before he'd completed the last sentence. Now, who wants something to drink? Ciders all around, please, Halls. Right you are, my boy. Not too tired after the long walk to Bambrough and back, Cedric? Victor chuckled as the cat wiped some sweat off his brow. I've gotten Cedric used to long walks since we both set off last week. Indeed, he is now a bold wayfarer. I told you that I didn't mind a good stroll. However, if you'll excuse me. The coyote eagerly sat down on one of the logs surrounding the lit campfire, undoing his jacket buttons, taking off his boots, and stretching his legs immediately after. You already feel like one of us, if that makes sense, ever since you first stepped foot in the camp. That means ever so much to me, Sel. Thank you. I need to stop listening to that voice in the back of my head. Dion told me that it's moments like these that prove someone is willing to improve and has the guts to do so. Aye, indeed, he's correct. Now, would you like to show Vic today's loot? Oh, yes. Cedric fumbled about as he pulled the day's prize from his right pocket. That's gorgeous. Why, just the purse alone would be a great deal. I'm so proud of you, darling. The coyote grinned, finally feeling a sense of accomplishment. I did my best. Hollis reappeared with a couple of pints of sweet cider in each hand. The lad really has a surprising knack for banditry, considering his high-end origins. Oh, Cedric, you said that you'd like to get one practice done, right? The coyote nodded as he tasted his drink. Then I hope you're not too tired, because there's one more thing that I'd like you to assist me with this evening. Hollis chuckled to himself. Keep it in your pants, Vic. Actually, Dion would be joining us too. Now this is getting steamy. Why wasn't I invited? The fox rolled his eyes, waving his hand at the tiger dismissively. Oh, be quiet, Hall. I'm talking about a job. Cedric's ears perked up. Oh? The three of us could dine at the Hunter in Hiddingstone, listen in on some conversations, and mug a couple of posh drunks on their way home. A bit like the evening that I came across you again. Except this time you'd be the one doing the mugging. How does that sound? Cedric had stopped worrying about the risk factor by now, and just treated this as he would any other normal suggestion. Plus, the others were right. The more practice that he got, the better bandit he'll become. And come to think of it, he was starting to feel pretty hungry. With a dash of unusual confidence, he wiped his mouth with the left hand while he finished drinking. Why not? As long as we don't have to come across those marshes from earlier again. Noticing a lack of replies from the other bandits, the coyote rolled his eyes jokingly. We're going to have to cross those marshes again, aren't we? Victor burst out laughing. You'll just have to wait and see, darling. All right. Just give me a moment to relax and gather my strength before we set off. Of course. I'll go tell Dion you're coming with us. You get some rest now. And great work so far. Cedric smiled. Thanks, V. Just over half an hour later, Victor, Cedric, and Dion were sharing a small, dirty table in Hidingstone's Hunter's Inn. The Hunter was the most popular tavern in the area and attracted a numerous and varied crowd of clients. The rooms were small and dingy, the large and brightly lit main hall being the only exception. All sorts of paraphernalia hung on the walls, a sign of the many landlords and landladies that had come and gone over the years, displaying their taste for paintings, etchings, and antiques on the pub walls without removing the items that they've already found there. The result was what felt like a cluttered but charming unique space, especially in the smaller rooms, giving them a homely and lived-in atmosphere. Kings, sea captains, soldiers, and folktale creatures, and characters alike all lived side by side on the centuries-old walls, lit up by the dim candlelight and the crooked lamps that hung from the low ceilings. So low, in fact, Dion had to crouch down most of the way in. A band of musicians occupied one of the corners in the main hall, and the sound of popular tunes and dances echoed all around the building. Upon arrival, the bandits had walked in the opposite direction of the players, aiming to find a spot where other people's conversations could be heard without much effort. They'd conveniently managed to take a seat next to two of the richest-looking clients in the tavern, a broad toad and a thin raccoon, both wrapped up in conversation. The toad's coat had some bright gold leaflet decorations, the raccoon's a silk dark red. Both were also sporting some fine-looking jewelry and tucked-in pocket watches. "Here's your food, my darlings." A tall sow with a fiery look in her eyes put three large plates down on the bandits' tables. "Thank you very much, missus." "Cheers." As the hostess walked away, Cedric ravenously eyed the food before him, picking up his knife and fork without hesitation. "Bon appetit, comrades." Victor cut a thick slice out of the pie that he ordered. "Ugh, must you speak French?" The hyena snorted, as his mouth was already full. "Right then. Guten Appetit, camaraden. Buen provecho, camaradas. Bon appetito, compagni. Senam vestrum, fruimini, sodalis." Or, as the common folk would say, "dig in, you cunts." Dion turned to Cedric as he began to make some conversation, all the while Victor's ears were still perked up, overhearing what was being spoken about at the table next to theirs. "I was reading a novel earlier. I was wondering if you are familiar with it at all, Cedric, my lad. It's called The Hound of Immerswitch. A cracking good story, might I add." "I'm familiar with the tale, but I've actually never heard of it." "Oh, you must. It is most exquisite. Terrifying at times, awe-inspiring at others. A book for true romantics of the strum, drang sort." "You might as well be speaking gibberish for all I know." "You'd enjoy it too, Victor. The main character is a soldier turned highwayman, roaming the haunted Scottish glens." "I'm slightly more interested in the here and now, if you don't mind." The fox gestured at the two animals sitting close by. Dion replying quietly. "Have you heard anything interesting?" "Not yet. Just give him a few more minutes." Dion turned to Cedric again, resuming their talk in a lower tone as Victor kept listening to the parallel conversation occurring nearby. "What's your favorite genre? You strike me as a more realist, if I had to take a guess." "You wouldn't consider yourself a party animal, Reginald?" "Well, I tend to go for realism or romance, but I also can't stand people who think fantastical stories are worth less attention." "Not for me. I prefer my quiet solitude." "I have a hard time believing that." "It's a backwards, mostly religion-fueled notion people can't seem to shake off." "One of many." "Aye, indeed." "I was asking because I heard talk of the big masquerade ball taking place in a couple of months' time, the first Saturday of December." Victor suddenly shushed his companions, letting them know that he had just heard something important. The three listened with their heightened curiosity as the two gentlemen carried on their conversation unaware anyone else was privy to it. "Masquerade ball? Really, Horatio? What do you take me for? Some boyish knave?" "I could see you having fun at that sort of event. It's a way to socialize without the pressure of being seen and judged the way that you would at any other gathering." "And where would this be happening? Not that I am particularly interested." The raccoon laughed merrily as he downed what looked like his fifth pint. "See? I knew you'd be curious about it. The big manor house just outside of Castle Halesford. You know the one. It's an open invite event." Victor's eyes lit up with excitement as he looked back at his companions. "Did you just hear that? Heavens, this is some big news. I'm guessing anyone who is someone will be going to that ball. And if word of mouth has spread so rapidly, the attendance will most likely be huge." Victor grinned maliciously. "What if the masquerade joined in on the fun?" Dion replied nonchalantly, checking his painted fingernails. "I'm sure we can plan something out." "Fuck yes. Today is a lucky day." "My boy, you really are a good luck charm." The fox pulled Cedric close to where he was sitting, hugging him and giving him a quick kiss on the cheek. "V, are you mad? We're in a crowded tavern. Victor raised a hand to his forehead. I'm just tipsy, officer. I must have been given a sweet love potion instead of my drink. Dion interrupted the banter. As for the here and now, I have a suggestion on how about we go with our job this evening, if you'd agree to it. We're all ears. Vic, I am thinking that you could go and have a chat with our new friends while Cedric and I leave. I can see the alcohol's effects are beginning to hit them, so perhaps you could help them in the right direction when exiting the place. Victor regained a serious composure as he focused on the hyena's plan. Sure, where will you two be waiting? Second side street to the left. Got it. You can count on me. Cedric, lad, would you like to act as a leader during the mugging? The coyote hadn't been expecting this and took a while to answer, worrying that this might be a step that he wasn't ready to take. He began to feel a strange tingling sensation creeping up his spine. I'll walk you through it. You just have to put on a big act, and of course, I'll be there in case things get out of hand. Would you be okay with doing this, my dear? We can always modify the plan if necessary. It was going to be a risky task for the coyote. But on the other hand, this was a golden opportunity for him, and he had Victor and Dion to assist him along the way. You won't have to. I'll do it. This is just what I needed. Victor proudly smiled, hearing his childhood friend utter such decisive words. Splendid. Off you go then, Vic. I owe you a kiss, Cedric. The fox stood up with his chair, picking up the mug he'd been drinking from and feigning a drunken swagger approaching the two men. And off we go too, my boy. Cedric followed the tall hyena who had already begun to bend down to avoid hitting any of the beams on the pub's ceilings. They walked past the other tables, the jolly music getting louder as they neared the exit. Dion and Cedric joined in on the clapping too, as the coyote turned his head to catch a glimpse of Victor, who was now seated between the toad and the raccoon, the three of them laughing and seemingly having a great time. He envied how easily Victor managed to interact with strangers, a skill Cedric had certainly felt lacked. Noticing the coyote had stopped in his tracks, Dion spoke up, almost seeming to read his companion's mind. That's all practice too, lad. A bit of theater, a dash of confidence and attentive listening will get you very far. I am proud of the skills I managed to teach Victor. Though he does tend to get a bit carried away sometimes. After you. Dion gestures at the exit, Cedric quickly snapping out of his thoughts as he exited the tavern, followed by the older bandit. The contrast couldn't be greater. Hidingstone streets were pitch black and completely silent. Any noise that could be heard was coming from the building behind them, the only vessel of life in a seemingly dead landscape. The two made their way to the side street Dion had mentioned a couple of minutes earlier, halting as they reached its end and could begin to discern the distant fields and pastoral landscape surrounding the town. The hyena set the bag that he'd been carrying with him down on a wooden box, pulling out a pair of long, dark overcoats and their respective masks, handing Cedric the Venetian-style mask the coyote had purchased just a few buildings away mere days before. This doubles as our loot bag. Victor has one too, as you saw earlier. He handed it to Cedric once the coyote had put on his coat and fixed the mask behind his hat, donning his own garments as he carried on. Now the key word is confidence. You're in charge, and they will do as you say. They are also drunk and will likely have slow reflexes, so you should be able to anticipate any move that they try to surprise you with. Vic will have made sure to take any weapons that they might have off of them, so you're perfectly safe. If they don't cooperate, don't hesitate to press your knife to their necks, or even draw out a drop of blood. It will get things done faster. Cedric gazed at the sharp knife that he was holding in his faintly trembling right hand. Any questions? The coyote gulped nervously. He began to feel sweat drip down his forehead. Victor had better get a move on dragging their victims out of that pub. What should I say first? The hyena's soft chuckle resonated behind his mask. You have a vast repertoire to choose from. Your money or your life is a firm favorite among bandits. Any variation of this, such as hand over your valuables and no one gets hurt, will do. Or even just a good evening at first, if you're feeling particularly cocky. Make sure your victims are always facing you, and never forget to keep an eye on their hands. That's very important. A faint sound of chattering and laughing began to resound at the opposite end of the street as the dark shapes of Victor and the other two men came into view. Dion and Cedric hid behind the corner where the old houses ceased, the hyena patting his companions on the back encouragingly. The coyote gripped his knife with such force that he was amazed that the handle didn't snap off. I'll be right behind you. Now on the count of three. The voices grew louder, and now Cedric could clearly make out what was being said. 1. The two drunkards burst into song, Victor quickly joining them in chorus, still playing along. 2. Cedric cleared his throat, getting ready to dive headfirst into the dark alley. 3. His feet began to move almost by themselves, time slowing down with each step he took. He felt himself turn the corner and impassively approach the three men. He held out his right hand so that the knife he was clutching was clearly visible. Your money, sirs. Too softly spoken, Cedric's voice had been barely audible over the loud singing. He recalled some of Dion's acting advice from a few days prior. The hyena had stressed the importance of projecting and exaggerating one's speech, just the right amount. He hadn't managed to follow that advice, and thus the others hadn't taken any notice of him, except Victor, who stepped aside as he pulled his own mask out of his bag. Shit. Okay, Cedric, your entrance was a fiasco. There was still time. The two victims were even now just a few steps away from where the coyote was standing. He'd have to try again. He then became aware of a huge shadow appearing beneath his feet from his rear and engulfing the alley in darkness. The drunken revelry finally came to an end as the two men noticed a figure towering behind Cedric. The coyote spoke up in a growling tone, taking a step forward with all the confidence that he could muster, pointing his knife straight at them. I said, your money or your lives. Shit. Bandits. Fuck. Oh, please don't kill us. We'll give you anything. We'll do anything. Then you can shut your fucking mouths for a start. How about that? Cedric pressed the knife close to the raccoon's neck as Victor did the same to the toad, approaching him from the back. He tried to imitate Victor's mannerisms as best as he could, and so far it seemed to be working. Your pockets. Empty them. The fox spoke up as he noticed some hesitancy from the two. Do as he says. Now. The two men emptied their pockets, revealing a couple of purses as well as some loose coins. Victor bent down to collect them, holding his sack in his left hand. At that precise moment, the raccoon threw his leg backwards with a surprising amount of strength, kicking an unsuspecting Victor to the ground. Ah! What the? Bastard! Before he knew it, Cedric was holding his fist out after having punched the raccoon, knocking him unconscious and sending him toppling to the ground, falling over Victor in the process. Pick him up, if you please. The hyena followed Cedric's orders. Don't you try anything similar or I'll cut your hand off. The coyote now meant every word that he was saying, and it showed. That's a very pretty pocket watch. He yanked the golden watch off its chain, throwing it in the bag. Now off with your coat, Frog. Lad, take the other one's coat off of him. Aye, aye. Victor slid the raccoon's garments of his unconscious body, rolling him around until he was face down on the cobbled street, the fox's muzzle displaying a devilish grin beneath the mask. You really hit him hard. Right. I think that's everything. Good job, lad. I knew I could trust you. Let me get this last bit over and done with. Victor faced their still conscious victim. Now listen, mate. I want you to walk away, turn the corner, and keep walking down the main street in utter and complete silence. And I don't even want to hear you breathe. Get it? The toad nodded frantically. If I hear anything out of you, I'll shoot you dead. Do you understand? More nodding. Off you go. The three watched with bated breath as the toad sauntered away, catching himself a couple of times to avoid stumbling to the ground. His shape soon faded in the darkness, and the bandit were surrounded by silence once more. Now, we get the hell out of here. Follow me. They ran across the empty fields that encompassed the town, setting foot in the now familiar forest in a matter of minutes. After hiking amongst the thick bushes and overgrowth for a couple of minutes, Dion broke the silence. Lads, you've both made me very proud. A job well done indeed. He glanced at the coyote, who was still panting after the short run. As for Cedric, remind me to never get on your bad side. Both Dion and Victor burst into laughter. Aye, indeed. He knocked that raccoon clean out with one punch. Cedric suddenly remembered the reason that he'd landed such a heavy blow. Are you feeling all right, by the way, V? Absolutely peachy, my dear. Thank goodness. What's more, I already know Ridley will love the 2 coats we snatched. It was only that moment, as Victor and Dion kept conversing, that the coyote realized just how sweaty he was and how rapid his heartbeat had gotten during the and after the mugging. Even though this still felt overwhelming, the feeling of mild panic that had settled in as Dion was running through the do's and don'ts earlier was finally starting to dial down. Noticing Cedric's silence, the fox turned to face him. Everything all right, Cedric? I hope this wasn't too much for you. I'm fine. I just need some time for everything that we've done to sink in. It almost doesn't feel like it's happened yet, you know? Of course, I understand. The coyote smiled. It feels like these jobs are getting easier to do as time goes on. Victor patted him on the shoulder. Brilliant, lad. Practice makes perfect. It will feel even easier as time goes on. The conversation came to an end, the group maintaining their steady pace, waiting for the distant light of the campfire to come into view. You know something? Hmm? Cedric lazily turned his head to the left to get a good view of the fox. The 2 friends were lying down on their tent after having tidied their belongings and emptied the sacks containing the evening's loot. Both stolen coats had been handed over to Ridley, who had accepted them enthusiastically, much as Victor had anticipated. Cedric had excused himself soon after, struggling to keep his eyes open following what had revealed itself to be a very exhausting day. Now he was lying with his arms and legs stretched out, the familiar sinking sensation of oncoming slumber overpowering his tired muscles. Just a month ago, I never would have imagined that this is where I'd be, here with you, with the others, away from home at long last. If someone had told me that, I would have laughed in their face and called them a liar. Cedric wasn't quite sure where the fox was going with this, so he decided to wait before giving a response. What I'm trying to say is, I know I can be a negative person. My life has shaped me this way. There are events in my past that I fought to leave behind, that I wish didn't define me as an individual. But what has happened to us has shown me how unpredictable life can be. It's given me some hope that I didn't know that I was still capable of feeling. After such a long time, living feels good again. The coyote smiled faintly, slurring his words with more than a hint of drowsiness. There's always a way out, a way forward. That's what I've learned since being reunited with you. He wrapped his right hand around Victor's. Sorry for rambling. It's just nice to have someone that I can say all these things to. Someone who I know will understand. No need to apologize. I've also been trying to ask you something, but haven't found the right moment. Now's as good a time as any. The fox took a deep breath. We've kissed. We've slept together and shared so much already, yet I still haven't actually asked you. Will you be my partner, Cedric? The coyote's eyes grew wide following a slightly delayed reaction, snapping him out of his drowsiness. What? He almost expected to wake up and discover that this had all been a dream, much like most fairy tale stories of the time. Romantically, I mean. Sorry, I should have said fiancé, but that implies that we'll be getting married. Cedric chuckled at realizing the ever-confident Victor was now the flustered one in this scenario. He interrupted the fox's stuttering as his own giggling got louder until he could no longer contain it, bursting out into a wild laugh. This was it. It was actually happening. Everything the coyote had been dreaming of was coming true. Victor eyed him in a panic, clueless as to why Cedric was acting in such a way. Is everything all right? The coyote nodded as He did his best to compose himself again. Victor, we've been close ever since I can remember. He paused as he attempted to choose his words as carefully as he could manage. It's almost a fraternal bond that I'd have a lot of trouble explaining to most people. Yeah, I understand. You'd rather it stay that way. I won't hold it against you. Cedric raised his voice as he noticed the fox was getting sidetracked yet again. My answer is yes. I will be your partner. He leaned forward, slipping an arm around the back of Victor's head and kissing him gently on the lips. He pulled back a few inches from the fox once he felt something wet his cheek, only to realize that it was a tear. Victor's eyes were damp, his hair all matted and his fur uneven, yet he was smiling, and to Cedric he couldn't have been more perfect. The coyote had finally stopped questioning the new twists fate had kept presenting him, excitedly accepting his proposal along with the eminent new role in his life. It was an uncertain future that he was willing to dive into. A future together with the man that he loved the most. I love you. I love you too. There was almost a ring of inevitability to those words the moment that they escaped his mouth. Now, let's get a good night's sleep. I'm utterly exhausted. Sunlight colored the plain walls of the servants' quarters, all windows having left open due to the beautiful summer weather outside. Emma, one of the older housemaids, was quietly scrubbing some dirty rags over a bucket of soapy water, humming an old ballad tune to herself. She heard some very familiar footsteps on the wooden floor, loudly approaching at a running pace. Hanging the cloth by the window with a couple of pegs, she lifted her head to greet the 14-year-old she had already guessed was responsible for the noise. Good afternoon, dear. The boy finally appeared in the corner, coming to a halt outside the housemaid's room. He was wearing a short, bright red jacket, coupled with a pair of yellow breeches and shiny hunting boots, a black helmet with straps, and a whip at his side. Afternoon, Emma. Have you seen Victor at all? Why, you look like a proper fine gentleman today. Have you been out and about? Cedric nodded, still catching his breath. Yes, I've been hunting with my father. Ah, of course. You told me, didn't you? Silly me. It's been nice having the place to myself, to be honest with you. Vic's in his room, if I'm not mistaken. Cedric, is that you? The fox had obviously heard the two and rushed out of his room to join Cedric. What ho, you rascal! I was about to have a swim in the lake. Would you care to join me? I'll race you to the willow tree. Emma raised her voice as the two skirted off. Remember, you need to help your father carry in the food supplies after 6 o'clock, Victor. The fox replied from a distance. I won't forget. The feeling of cold water on his fur was all Cedric could have wished for after a long day out. He and Victor swam about beneath the friendly willow shade, splashing each other playfully as they went. After some time, Victor dived into the water without re-emerging a couple of seconds later. Cedric inevitably began to panic, moving towards the spot where he'd seen him disappear. Suddenly, he felt a tug at his legs. He lost his balance and fell backwards, yelping. Victor finally emerged, laughing and sputtering as he caught his breath. Got you. Shut up, Cedric replied with mock outrage at being outwitted by his friend. Serves you right for disappearing without a trace this morning. My father forced me to join him and his friends. I didn't have time to tell you about it. It's all right. I'm just joking. How was your first hunt, by the way? To be honest, extremely dull. Most of it was just everyone moving around on horseback waiting for something to happen. It's probably exciting if you're a rich person with nothing whatsoever to do. I guess so. The two stepped out of the lake, shaking themselves all over to dry their fur in fresh air. The bundle of clothes Cedric had left on the ground caught the fox's eye. Those garments suit you. I've never seen you look like a real noble before. They'd give anyone the appearance of a gentleman. You should try 'em on. Victor hesitated, his friend picking up his socks and yellow breeches and handing them to him. Come on. I'm curious now, and we're both very similar sizes. Cedric smiled as the fox slid them on easily. One day, when half this property is yours, this will be your regular attire, Sir Victor. Hmm, I wouldn't count on it. The coyote handed him the hunting boots, Victor donning them not without some effort. And lastly, the jacket. Cedric took a step back as the fox struck up a pose, imitating the figures that he'd observed in the paintings hung around the estate. Wow, I was right. The coyote began to feel an emotion that he couldn't explain at the sight of his friend looking so handsome. Victor spoke up again, walking in his friend's direction. Actually, I changed my mind. I could get used to this. Victor bent down, picking up the whip Cedric had been carrying along with his riding helmet. And what devious activities do you get up with this, do tell? It's for the horse, you half-wit. A devious smile crossed the fox's face as he approached his friend, Cedric growing more embarrassed than ever. Is it? He darted away as Victor playfully chased them beneath old garden trees. Wait there, you fool. I want to go and get some drawing paper. Don't you want a dignified portrait? The coyote almost fell over as his father suddenly appeared before him, Victor disappearing behind one of the trees, hiding as rapidly as he could. What in God's name is going on here, Cedric? Might I ask why you are running around the garden stark naked? I'm not naked. I don't want to hear any of your excuses. Go collect your clothes and make your way to the drawing room. As you might recall, Mr. Farley is ill, thus indisposed to teaching. Dr. Phyllis is waiting for you to join him for his algebra lesson. Cedric lowered his head, afraid to meet his father's piercing, icy gaze. Yes, father. The older coyote walked away in the stable's direction. You'll be going hunting with me soon again. You did reasonably well this morning. Thank you. But if I see that servant boy wearing your clothes again, I'm canning both of you. You understand? I said, have I made myself clear? You'll never be worth anything until you learn not to mingle with those beneath you. They are leeches, ready to suck you dry the moment that your presence comes in handy. Perhaps he has already abandoned you for another young lad. That sort cannot be trusted after all, not even with feelings of the heart. They will desert you the moment that you're no longer useful. As will that young fox if you give him too much notice. Either that, or he'll drag you to hell alongside him. Cedric! Ced, wake up! Cedric and Victor's tent, followed by the surrounding campsite, came into view as the coyote opened his eyes, adjusting to the morning light. His father's words still rung out in the back of his mind, like the fateful toll of a ghostly bell. What? Who? Ridley was standing a few feet away, twirling a pocket knife in his left hand with one foot on the makeshift bed the two had been sharing. He sure had a nerve at all times. Cedric turned to his left, no trace of the fox. In fact, Victor's side of the bed appeared to have just been made. We didn't want to leave without you. Leave? Where are we going? Don't you recall? Or did Victor tell you? Scratch that. He obviously forgot to tell you. He's been too bothered letting us all know how in love with each other you both are. The sun bear let out a boyish giggle. Cedric blinked. What? Blake and I are supposed to be robbing a carriage up in Plowman's Hill today. I asked Victor if you two wanted to join us. You know, it's always helpful to have a bigger team just in case. And Dion told me how well you did yesterday evening, so I came up with a plan. Could you just give me 5 minutes, Ridley? The other bandit seemed to finally realize Cedric might need a moment to wake up and gather his thoughts. He took a step back, exiting the tent. Oh, and please ask Victor to come and talk to me. Of course. Sorry for the rough wake-up call. Cedric sat up and washed his face, using the porcelain bowl and jug that he was sharing with Victor. He threw on a vest and donned a new pair of breeches Ridley had left at the foot of the bed for him. As he was combing his hair, Victor walked back in. What is it, darling? So what's this about telling the whole world that we're dating? I thought you'd be fine with it. And what's with this other talk about a heist with Ridley and Blake? I wanted to wake you up earlier, but you were so fast asleep. I didn't. He left the sentence unfinished, pausing to choose his words more carefully. I'm sorry. I should have asked you about both these things. Victor's face grew flushed with shame, and Cedric couldn't help but think just how adorable his partner looked like this. The coyote's expression finally grew more relaxed at the sight. He extended his right hand towards Victor. Thank you for apologizing, love. Now let's let bygones be bygones. They shook hands, Cedric leaning in to give the fox a quick kiss of reassurance. You can tell the others that I love to join you all. I just need to finish getting dressed. I'll only be a minute. Take your time. Oh, speaking of getting dressed, could you pop by Ridley's tent as soon as you're done? He told me that he needed to have a chat with you. Cedric snickered at the small realization. My mood definitely scared him off. The fox returned the banter as he stepped outside again. I wouldn't be surprised. 'Twas absolutely frightful, my dear. Cedric shot Victor a playful glare. Yes, that's the look that scares them off. Cedric went to grab something soft to throw at the fox, but he was already darting away, chuckling to himself as his footsteps grew fainter. Once Cedric had combed his hair as best as he could manage without a proper mirror, donned his jacket and his boots, and slipped a couple of small knives into a pouch on his right pocket, he made his way across the camp, heading for the bear's lodgings. As he stepped inside, he realized that he had never actually set foot in his particular tent. It was crammed with all sorts of objects, clothing, and fine jewelry, sharing the space along with a couple of candlesticks, mostly missing any candles, and a few books that had been left scattered on the ground. Cedric noticed to great envy that the bear had a real mirror propped against the tent's fabric. Ridley was sitting on a rickety chair facing the glass with what appeared to be a blonde wig in his hands. Come in, Cedric. Are you feeling all right? I'm sorry I lost my temper just now. No need to apologize. I deal with Blake Brynham on a daily basis. Did you talk things through with Vic? It's all good now, and I'm ready to come along with you. Splendid. Now let me just explain how we're planning to go about this. Victor and Blake will be donning their masks and hiding as we wait for a carriage to pass by. However, you and I will be the ones putting on a bit of an act. He spun around, finally facing Cedric instead of the coyote's reflection. I see you've carefully combed your hair. Unfortunately, you're going to have to mess it up again. The more unkempt, the better. You'll be lying on the ground, feigning being wounded after being attacked by bandits, while I'll be at your side posing as a fellow traveler, calling for help. Our victims will come to a halt, and at least one of them will dismount their vehicle. As they lean forward to pick you up, that's when Vic and Blake will appear, and I will reveal whose side I'm actually on. That's pretty ingenious, I gotta admit. And all I'm asking you to do is lie down for a while. What could be better? Cedric laughed as a dumb thought crossed his mind. You should have kept me asleep, just carried me there in a stretcher. Here now, I didn't take you for such a slob, said. The coyote playfully waved off the remark. I'm gonna have to get your clothes messed up and dirty if you want to go through with our little act. I'll clean everything else once we're back here, of course. I'm fine with whatever you do, Rid. You know I trust you. The sun bear picked up a thick hairbrush and a bowl containing a pale earth colored powder, then walked over to Cedric. He began to unevenly dirty the coyote's jacket and breeches close to the tent's exit, so as not to get any powder on any of the objects inside. Trust is a strong word, lad. Never trust a bandit. In fact, I hardly trust you. Who knows what nefarious secrets lie behind that sweet and innocent looking face of yours? He affectionately ruffled the coyote's hair as a finishing touch, then threw some powder on his own outfit and walked back to his chair, fitting the wig, some flasks, and a small mirror into a modest sack that he slipped around his left shoulder. Off we go. As they joined the other two companions, Victor couldn't help but smile at Cedric's disheveled appearance. What did you do to him, Rid? Oh, hush. We've been over the plan, is all. So that's where I'm going to leave it for today. So, some stuff happened. obviously. Cedric basically did his first pickpocketing. Um, and it went about as expected. He was able to do it, but at the same time, he was not very situationally aware. He ended up bumping into someone, which could have ended badly because then this was like, oh, you dropped your purse, but then the bull would have been like, oh, well, what's going on there? It's like, oh no, where's my purse? Oh no, that guy has my purse. Um, and by purse, I think they mean like the little. Actually, no, this is probably a purse. This is like set in the past. Um, what else? Oh, also, they were eavesdropping on a conversation between some rich people. Uh, they being Cedric, Vincent, and Dion, and they got information about a ball that's coming up, a masquerade ball. Which I mean, it's perfect timing. They all have, I guess you could say, masquerade masks, and that basically says like, oh well, we can go in, we can probably sneak in. Um, and Cedric's probably going to be like the main one in because he's the one that has proper um like etiquette treatment and stuff like that. So he's probably the one that's going to get them in correctly or not correctly. He's the one that's going to ensure that they get in without any complications. Um Also Cedric was leading his first mugging, which was successful, thankfully, even though it didn't have a good start at the beginning. But yeah, it was successful. What else? And apparently something else is happening. Cedric and Vincent are also now quote unquote partners. Which is to say that they are boyfriends. It was obvious from the beginning that this is what was going to happen with these two. What is not obvious is what's going to eventually happen with them in the next video. um, but yeah, obviously also something else is about to happen as Ridley wakes Cedric up with like uh, with a new plan. Apparently these people don't take a day off. Um, so yeah, you'll be watching that soon. Anyway, so what are your thoughts, comments, etc., etc.? Write it down in the comments, and thank you all for watching / listening. If you would like to play A Fall from Grace, you can do so by getting down and going down into the link in the description, which should have a direct link for their HIO page where you can download the game and play it. And if you would like to support the project, which I believe is sort of like I think it's called Project New Moon, which encompasses A Fall from Grace as well as what's the other one called? One Last Night. You can do so by heading down to their Patreon, which I am currently highlighting. Even though you can barely tell that I'm highlighting it. But yeah, that one. Um, so yeah, early access, etc., etc. And all other pertinent links are listed down in the description. And yeah, I guess that's it for now, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.